Good morning. We're back on the record in the Black Hills electric grid case 24AL-0275E.
I can't
It's
hear you. I can.
not, oh, go
Sorry,
ahead.
it was my fault. I couldn't hear you and it was my own speaker. I apologize. Go on.
No worries. It's 9 a.m. on Tuesday, December 10th, and a special appreciation to Commissioner Gilman for bailing me out tomorrow and keeping us moving. So thank you. With that, any preliminary matters before we jump to Ms. Fernandez, Mr. Fernandez, Mr. Sopkin? You're still on mute, sir.
Sorry, I didn't know if Ms. Concealia had a preliminary matter before me.
Oh, Ms. Concealia.
I do have a preliminary matter. I sent out to Mr. Sopkin a conferral request. After listening to this proceeding and looking at things, it appears to me that the company has over-designated, overused confidential, and as well as highly confidential. My clients have a right to know why there has been a rate freeze in South Dakota. My clients have a right to know a lot of things that have been designated confidential. And quite frankly, I have a right to know a lot of this highly confidential information. So I'm not asking the commission for any action today. I just want to alert you that if Mr. Sopkin and I cannot work this out, I'm going to file a motion. I'm going to ask for sanctions. And I would ask that the commission hear the matter on an expedited basis, as opposed to sending it to an ALJ, because we need to get these issues resolved for the SOP. So that is my housekeeping notification, Your Honor.
Um, uh, is Ms. Dundas or Commission Counsel out there somewhere? Ms. Dundas. Can I hear this as a hearing commissioner, or does it have to come back to the full commission en banc, which would limit us to weekly meetings? Any advice just in terms of who hears it?
Thanks, Chair. I mean, nothing's been filed yet, so I think it would be best to discuss that once Ms. Concealia files something. And
Okay.
it sounds like she won't be filing something unless conferral fails, if that's.
All right.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you for the heads up. I appreciate the disclosure, and we'll wait till we have something in front of us to take any further action.
Thank you.
Mr. Sopkin, any preliminary matters before we start with Mr. Fernandez?
I do have three, and with regard to what Ms. Concealia is saying, I guess my worry is if there's a suggestion that the record should not be closed, the evidentiary record should not be closed at the end of today, we've got a problem. We duly filed motions for highly confidential protection. They were granted. Ms. Concealia did not file a response in opposition. And to say on the last day of hearing that the evidence that has come in is somehow inadequate because she has not been afforded access to materials that the commission has already ruled should be treated as highly confidential is deeply bothersome to me, because we have a serious issue on our hands in this proceeding as to whether the evidentiary record needs to be reopened. I think that's what she's saying. Yesterday, she did send me an email conferral and asked about two things: whether the fact of a rate freeze in South Dakota is confidential. We said, no, it's not confidential. And she asked about credit rating agency reports, which are confidential, not highly confidential. And she has access to those. And our response was, we marked them confidential because of copyright. These materials are subscription materials from credit rating agencies. They need to be paid for them. The way we handle that is by doing ordinary confidentiality. And I believe every party in this proceeding has submitted a ordinary confidentiality NDA. And so every party has had access to that. So this idea that we should be subject to sanctions is a bit over, I don't know the word, but it's beyond comprehension to me.
All right, just so we're clear, as between all of us, no one's proposing that the evidentiary record remain open past the close of the hearing. As I understand it, any disputed issue, which may not be disputed as you guys talk, is whether Ms. Concealia and her clients have access to certain highly confidential information. So as I understand it, I don't see why that would keep the record open somehow past today. But Ms. Concealia, can you correct me if I understand this wrong?
You do not understand it wrong. I am not asking that the record be kept open. However, as I told Mr. Sopkin yesterday, I'm reserving all rights, and I believe this is one of the grounds on which I will ask for a dismissal of this rate case in total. So, not asking to keep it open.
Well, let's not litigate anything, pre-litigate anything. Now there's nothing been filed. We haven't, the conferral hasn't happened. I don't want to prejudge any motion that may or may not come to us. It would be my intent to close the evidentiary record, hopefully in the next hour or so. Mr. Sopkin, you said you had two other items.
Actually, I still have three, but two of them are easy.
All right.
The first one, Ms. Dundas mentioned yesterday that she would like us to put in a public version or slip sheet for hearing exhibit 118 SKJ 14 WP 54 COERRS schedule H12. So we do now have in box a slip sheet hearing exhibit 118 that we would ask to be admitted.
Any objections? Can you just say what that hearing exhibit is again? Just really briefly.
It simply states a public version of hearing exhibit 118 executable attachment. That whole list I did, SKJ 14 and so on.
Okay. Any objections? Hearing none, so admitted.
And then also yesterday morning we had discussed when Commissioner Gilman had some questioning for witness Ethan Friddle, this issue of an error came up regarding the small general service demand billing data and reclassifications. And I indicated yesterday morning that we had done that correction. We do have hearing exhibit 123, work paper 68 Rev 1. I did, per your suggestion, circulate that to the parties yesterday morning, somewhere around 9:30 a.m. I haven't heard any responses to that. So we would seek admission of hearing exhibit 123.
With that representation that everyone's had the opportunity to review it, any objections? Hearing none, so moved.
And then the last item is this item, which I think you indicated a process was established. It had to do with the examination of Ms. Segala and related specifically to capital structure of BHC and affiliates. And as I understand it, Ms. Mandel has, and she provided this to us last night, has developed a instruction, for lack of a better term, document that explains hearing exhibit 518. That's a highly confidential exhibit that we discussed in highly confidential session. And I think I could propose a way forward with that. I don't know if Ms. Mandel wants to weigh in yet.
You're muted, Ms. Mandel.
I'd like to hear the way forward. Thank you, Mr. Sopkin.
All right, the way forward. I'm not sure if hearing exhibit 518 was admitted. What we would, if it wasn't admitted, we would propose that both documents be admitted together as one document, because there's sort of an explanation of what adjustments were made by Ms. Segala. Or alternatively, there could be two documents, the hearing exhibit 518 and then an additional, I guess, hearing exhibit 519. I'm not sure which one Ms. Mandel prefers. But I think they're both highly confidential. Is that right, Ms. Mandel?
I believe staff hearing exhibit 518 it's an executable attachment. I believe that it was admitted, if I remember correctly, and the Chair Blank requested an explanation of hearing exhibit 518 because it consists of it's an executable and it has adjustments that Ms. Segala has made. So it's a worksheet, work paper that was provided to the company. And so Ms. Segala has prepared a 2-page document that explains the adjustments that she made in that worksheet, in that work paper. And I had marked it as hearing exhibit 519 as a subsequent document to explain hearing exhibit 518. And I do appreciate the company working with me last night and this morning because it's a little confusing with all the numbers. But I believe that the explanation on the document, the explanation contained in here, proposed hearing exhibit 519 explains the adjustments, and the only remaining issue is whether or not hearing exhibit 519, which is the 2-page document explaining the adjustments, whether that has to be highly confidential or confidential. That's not that big of a deal, and I wanted to give the company, we're just trying to work it through so that there's no issue with admission.
I guess 2 questions for you, Mr. Sopkin. Do you have any concerns about the admissibility of 519 based on your review from last night and this morning?
I do not have a concern about admissibility. I did want to state our position for the record to make clear we're not waiving certain arguments, and I could do that now if you like.
Yeah, that'd be, but one other preliminary question before you do that. Is there or does the 519 need to be confidential or highly confidential? Are you okay if it's just confidential?
I think I'm okay if it's just confidential.
So 518's in, 519 is going to be confidential. And Ms. Dundas or Ms. Kunkel, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Well, first of all, there's no 519 in either staff or Black Hills box. So I don't see where a 519 is anywhere. And my second question was, I don't have a 518 from yesterday either. I have a 516. Could it be 516?
We'll get that
dear.
uploaded to the box. Right now, it may only exist in emails between Ms. Mandel and Mr. Sopkin. We'll get that to box.
Okay.
I think we got maybe a Ms. Mandel.
I'm concerned about 518, not because I understand it was admitted, it was an executable attachment. That should be in the record and admitted. So if I could maybe work with staff counsel or staff personnel on that to ensure that is in the record. And 519 just
516 was the spreadsheet. 518 looks like a discovery response from
All right, let's can you guys see if you can work it out?
Yeah, this is a pretty big deal here.
We're not
to
going to
fix
close
this.
the record without figuring this out.
Thank you. Thank you.
But let's go. But let's go on. Was that your third item, Mr. Sopkin?
Yeah, and if we're going to revisit this later, I could state what our position is then.
Yeah, that'd be great. Let's get the exhibit numbers right. Let's get the right documents. Let's get everybody on the same page. Let's get all this stuff up in box. And in the meantime, Mr. Sopkin, do you have somebody who can address this while somebody else cross-examines Mr. Fernandez?
I'm crossing Mr. Hernandez. I'm hopeful that people around me are listening and we'll be working on that.
All right, we'll move forward on that basis. Is Mr. Fernandez out there?
Mr. Chairman, one thing before we bring Mr. Fernandez on, this is Mr. Bunker, and that is a question regarding during the cross-examination of Mr. Skluzak by Mr. Sopkin yesterday, there was a discovery response, UCA discovery response to Black Hills 2-7. And I did not happen to jot down the hearing exhibit number, but was that admitted or not?
If you could have someone on your team work with someone on Mr. Sopkin's team and Ms. Dundas, I don't recall.
Okay.
But if Ms. Kunkel, Ms. Dundas, and Black Hills Council can figure out where we're at. And if it's not at the end of Mr. Fernandez, we'll figure that out.
If memory serves, it was a part of Mr. Harrington's rebuttal testimony as an attachment, but we can clear that up.
That'd be
Okay.
great.
There was a confidential attachment to the response as well. 2-7, I believe, was subparagraph F. So if you could clear that up for us, that'd be great.
Yep. We won't close the record until that's clear too. Mr. Fernandez, can you hold up your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
You can put your hand down. Is anybody with you or communicating with you in any way?
No.
If that changes, you'll let us know.
I will.
Back to you, Mr. Bunker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fernandez, would you please state and spell your name for the record?
Ron Fernandez, Fernandez.
And would you identify your employer and position title?
I'm a financial analyst for the UCA.
And when you say the UCA, that's the Office of the Utility Consumer Advocate, correct?
Yes.
And did you cause to be filed hearing exhibit 303, which is your answer testimony and attachments RAF 1 through RAF 26 on behalf of the UCA in this proceeding?
Yes.
And do you have any corrections to make to your answer testimony and attachments?
No.
And if I ask you the same questions today as contained in your answer testimony, would your answers today under oath be the same?
Yes.
And hearing exhibit 303, Mr. Fernandez's answer testimony and attachments RAF 1 through RAF 26 have already been admitted. And so Mr. Fernandez is available for cross-examination and commissioner questions.
Mr. Sopkin, I have 30 minutes plus some residual goodwill. You're up, sir.
Thank you for the residual goodwill, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fernandez, how are you today?
I'm doing fine. How about you?
I'm doing well. I also know that I've met you, but I think that was pre-COVID, so it's been a while.
Yes.
So I'd like to start on page 7 of your answer testimony, hearing exhibit 303. Actually, page 6. All right. And at lines 3 through 8 of your testimony, you indicate UCA's analyses as presented in the testimony below result in a cost of capital and capital structure as follows for the HTY ended December 31, 2023. Number 1, a capital structure of 52.66% equity and 47.34% debt. Number 2, a cost of debt of 4.61%. Number 3, a return on equity ROE of 9.3%. And number 4, a weighted average cost of capital or WACC of 7.1%. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, you did.
All right. I'm only going to ask you today about item number 3, which is the return on equity recommendation of 9.3%. So with that in mind, turning to page 7, next page of this document, line 12, you indicate UCA is recommending a net revenue requirement of 17.6 million using a 9.3% ROE. You see that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, before we get into that 9.3% return on equity, I did want to ask you about one other item, which is the next question on this page. What other issues and risk-reducing items will impact the proposed rates for customers that the commission should take into consideration as it authorizes a rate increase in this proceeding? You see that question?
Yes.
And scrolling down just a little bit here to the bottom of the page. Beginning of line 21, you say the price of energy has been increasing. BHCOE will be automatically passing on these higher energy costs to its customers through its energy cost adjustment rider. My question is, when you say the price of energy, are you referring to natural gas prices?
That is a piece of it. Yes, because some of the electricity is generated with natural gas.
Pretty large piece of it, right?
Yes.
And you say, starting at line 23 and scrolling down, if we could scroll down a little bit, ECA riders provide utilities with a virtual guaranteed riskless recovery of all energy costs. Do you see that?
Yes.
Are you familiar with Storm Uri?
Yes.
And are you familiar with what happened with utilities, including Black Hills, Colorado Electric, in which the utilities had to spend an enormous amount of money over a 3-day period to purchase enough natural gas for the gas utility, for customer heating, for the electric utility, for its electric operations, in order to provide service over that 3-day period? Do you recall that?
Yes, and the utility got recovery from that in a separate proceeding with the commission. And if this had been a competitive company, they would have likely had to eat these hundreds of millions of dollars in costs.
So would you agree that the recovery period for Black Hills for the short-term debt it had to incur to pay for these natural gas costs, the recovery was spread out over 2 years?
I don't remember the exact timeline, but that sounds reasonable, varied for each of the utilities.
And did any of the utilities, were they able to recover their carrying costs, their interest costs incurred over that 2-year period?
I do not believe they were allowed to in Colorado. However, in other states, they were.
I'm asking about Colorado. Thank you. Does Black Hills Colorado Electric have a decoupling mechanism in which it is guaranteed recovery when the weather results in less than normal kilowatt hour usage?
I don't believe they have it in Colorado.
Okay. Turning to page 18. Beginning with line 5. I'm sorry, let's do line 10. It indicates, what method did UCA utilize to estimate the cost of equity for BHCOE? And you indicate that UCA utilized a CAPM analysis, a constant growth DCF analysis, a multi-stage DCF analysis, and recent authorized returns in U.S. utility cases to estimate a reasonable cost of equity for Black Hills Colorado Electric. You see that?
Yes.
And if we turn to page 68 of your testimony, and looking at, if we scroll down to table RAF 5, ROE summary, if you can scroll up one line, please. You indicate the table below summarizes UCA's ROE estimates and recommendations in this proceeding. And for cap M, that's 9.4%. For constant growth DCF, 9.7%. Multi-stage DCF, 9.3%. And recent authorized is 9.7%. You see that?
Yes.
And your UCA's recommendation, I'm sorry, you indicate a range of 9.3% to 9.7%. And UCA's recommendation is at the very bottom of that range, 9.3%. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. One moment. Would you agree that your recommendation at the low end of the range is tied to the assumption that interest rates will continue to decline?
Partially, the market is expecting capital costs overall to decline, equity, debt, etc.
Okay, so partly you do. Would you agree that historical return on equity findings must be viewed in the context of the capital market conditions that exist at the time the case is decided, this case?
Partially, the commission should take into account what is going in the market today and what is expected in the future when these rates go into effect.
So said another way, you'd agree that cost of equity models should reflect current market conditions and should be reflected of the current market or market going forward. Is that correct?
And I said partially because these methodologies, some of them take into account forward-looking forecasts or estimates.
Okay. And with regard to the current authorized rates of return for electric utilities, if we could turn to Mr. McKenzie's testimony, hearing exhibit 120 at page 28. And if we could scroll down to, there should be a table there. Now, Mr. McKenzie indicates that based on your proxy group, the current authorized rates of return for electric utilities would be 10.04%. Do you have any reason to disagree with Mr. McKenzie?
I did not review that information, so I'm not willing to accept it.
You have no basis to agree or disagree. Is that correct?
That looks high based on what we've seen in the marketplace and authorized for utilities. The vast majority of the recent authorized have been in the really 9.5 to 9.8%. So that looks high to me.
Okay, but Mr. McKenzie indicates line 10, as reported by value line, shown on pages 1-2 of attachment AMM16, that these are the values. Do you have any basis to disagree that that's what's reported by value line?
As I've mentioned, I have not validated these, so I am not willing to accept it. They look high.
Okay. All right. If we go to page 18 of Mr. Fernandez's testimony. And I'm sorry, we're on page 18, line 17. Here you indicate, do you agree with the company's cost of equity recommendations? You say no. Mr. McKenzie's cost of equity recommendations are overstated and out of line with what other regulatory commissions are currently authorizing. Mr. McKenzie's recommended ROE of 10.5% for the 2024 CTY is about 80 basis points greater than the average actual authorized ROEs for electric utilities in September 2024 year to date. You see that?
Yes.
And then your next line is UCA's estimate of the company's cost of equity is discussed more fully below. And if we could scroll down, and is more in line with what this commission has recently authorized and what other regulatory commissions are currently authorizing. You see that?
Yes, and this commission just authorized a ROE for PSCO of 9.2 to 9.5% last month.
Mr. Fernandez, you will get a chance for redirect. I asked you a pretty simple question. So let's talk about what other regulatory commissions are currently authorized. If we turn back to Mr. McKenzie's testimony, hearing exhibit 120 at page 23. Hold on, I think I have the wrong page. If we could scroll down a little. Oh, no, actually, I'm sorry, go back up. This is actually right. If we go up a little bit more. Okay. So here's Mr. McKenzie's testimony. Starting on line 21, Mr. Fernandez cites to an average ROE of 9.7% for electric utilities in 2024 year to date. Does this data point support the opposing witness's ROE recommendations? He says no. Even at the lowest point, average allowed ROEs for electric utilities have never been as low as the opposing witness's 9.3% recommendation, which falls 40 basis points below the 9.7% industry average cited by Mr. Fernandez. And my question is that correct that the industry average for all electric utilities, as cited by you, is 9.7%?
At that particular point in time, it is. And this is based on data for earlier this year and last year. And what we have been seeing is that these authorized ROEs have been declining over time. And I would fully expect to see this go down in 2025.
Okay, well, we will get to an update in a moment. Scrolling down a little bit from here, stop there. And he says on line 1, in addition, the 9.7% average cited by Mr. Fernandez includes distribution-only cases. And so it understates recently authorized ROEs for vertically integrated utilities like Black Hills. Mr. Fernandez's data source reports that average authorized ROEs for vertically integrated utilities averaged 9.8% in 2023 and 9.83% over the 12 months ended September 30, 2024. That's correct, isn't it, Mr. Fernandez? That's what your data source reports for 2023 and the 12 months ended September 30, 2024, correct?
S&P Global does provide this data. There's different ways to slice and dice it. I think this is another example of Mr. McKenzie cherry picking and picking the highest average out there. In that same document, S&P Global also reported the differences between settled and litigated cases. And I think litigated cases are are more representative of what commissions are authorizing. And if you want to take that number, it's below my 9.7%. So there are a lot of averages out there that you can derive from the data from S&P Global, and I used all results, all orders from the commissions, which I think is superior to cherry picking a particular item to support your case.
You used all orders from commissions, including both settled and litigated cases?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and this 9.83% for the 12 months ended September 30, 2024 applies to vertically integrated utilities. And you would agree that that's a more accurate comparison to Black Hills, Colorado Electric than wires or distribution-only utilities, correct?
There's a lot of other aspects as far as comparability, so I'm not willing to cherry pick one particular one in terms of comparability. I think using all is by far the best.
But that's not what you say in your testimony, is it? At page 42. Lines 6 through 7, you indicate which company should be excluded from Mr. McKenzie's utility proxy group, and you list what companies should be excluded. And one of those sets of companies that should be excluded is electric utilities without generation assets, which you'd agree those companies are not the most comparable to the target company, as you say in line 9, and the target company here is Black Hills, Colorado Electric, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So going back to your statement on page 18 at the end, you again at the end, beginning line 20, UCA's estimate of the company's cost of equity, skipping ahead to the next line, we could scroll down, is more in line with what other regulatory commissions are currently authorizing. I'd like to do a little math here based on that statement, which is your recommended ROE of 9.3% falls below the average actual authorized ROEs for electric utilities in September 2024 year to date by 40 basis points if we're looking at all utilities, or 53 basis points if we're looking at vertically integrated utilities, correct?
Yes, and it would be something less than that if we picked some other averages, such as only litigated cases.
Okay. And you would agree that Black Hills currently approved return on equity is 9.3%, which was authorized in December 2016, correct?
I believe it was 9.37%.
And if we turn to Mr. McKenzie's hearing exhibit 120 at page 24, would you agree that if you look at the BAA utility yield, that utility long-term bond yields have increased since 2016?
This chart shows that bond yields consistently went down from 1990 through about early 2021, and they have gone up since 2021, and lately have flattened and started to decrease. And this has been right in line with what we've seen the Federal Reserve do with interest rates. It's really paralleled that.
Okay, well, let's talk about what's happening lately. If we look at your CAPM analysis, So first, let's start with your testimony at page 19. Starting at line 13. This is the capital asset pricing model, and here you describe what that analysis is, right?
Yes.
And so what it is, very briefly, it's a risk premium method based on the principle that the cost of equity capital equals the cost of a risk-free investment plus a risk premium to compensate investors for the risks associated with a specific equity investment, correct?
At a high level, simplified basis, yes.
Okay. And just to go on a little bit, under that method, the overall market risk premium for common stock is adjusted to reflect the risk of a specific stock or sample of stocks using the stock's beta coefficient, which is a financial market measure used in developing a risk-adjusted risk premium that reflects the market risk of an individual stock, sometimes referred to as systematic risk, relative to the risk of the market as a whole. I'm almost done with this. So far, so good, right, Mr. Fernandez?
You have a valid definition of beta.
Okay. And that's probably because you're defining it here. And lines 21, 22, this stock-specific risk premium is then added to an appropriate risk-free rate to yield a total required rate of return, correct?
Yes.
All right, and I want to focus on that risk-free rate. In order for your, the way you determined a risk-free rate, you relied on forecasted U.S. Treasury bond yields. Is that correct?
Very short-term forecast, yes. And I outlined in my testimony why I've done that in this particular case. And in previous cases, I've typically used very current actual rates.
Yeah, in fact, in the 2016 case, you said it's difficult to forecast Treasury bond yields accurately, and as such, they should not be used in a CAPM analysis. That's what you said then, right?
Yes, and I've said that in multiple cases. And again, I've outlined in my testimony why I used a very short-term forecast. In this particular case, I used a December forecast, and we're in December.
That's right. And looking down, going to the next page of this, here's where you explain why. Well, hold on. Are we page 28? I'm sorry. Here's where you explain why you changed your methodology, and looking at starting at line 6, you say, I changed the methodology for determining Treasury bond yields due to what is currently happening in financial markets and the timing of this rate case. And you talk about previous rate cases, but then at line 9, with the Federal Reserve lowering interest rates in its September meeting, Treasury bond yields have decreased, and the market is forecasting that the Treasury bond yields will further decrease as the Federal Reserve continues to cut rates in the future, correct?
That's what I wrote.
And that's why you changed your methodology, right?
Yes.
All right. So if we could turn to hearing exhibit 201, please. Mr. Fernandez, I will represent to you. This is a work paper produced by UCA, marked as hearing exhibit 201. Fernandez risk-free rate. Do you recognize this document?
Yes.
All right. I would seek admission of hearing exhibit 201.
Any objection?
Give me a moment. Can we scroll down on this? In part, I'm confused by why it's hearing exhibit 201.
Can we
I'm
scroll
not
down?
understanding the numbering.
We ran out of numbers in the 100s, and so we got into the 200s.
You've been busy. Okay, I have no objection.
So admitted.
Scrolling back up, please. And so for your risk-free 30-year Treasury bond forecast, you relied on two different forecasts. Forecast.org, which actually I think that should be plural, right? Forecast.org and econ forecasting. Is that right?
Yes.
And so for forecast.org, that was showing for December 2024, 3.5%. And econ forecasting was showing, let me back up. Forecast.org was showing 3.5% as of December 2024. And econ forecasting was showing 3.53% in December 2024. And you simply averaged that to 3.52%. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. First question about those two organizations, forecast.org and econ forecasting. Would you agree that they are not that neither of those are widely used by the investment community?
I don't know that. They are, I know other people that have utilized these.
Okay, well, we asked you some discovery about that. If we could pull up first hearing exhibit 197. And if we could scroll down to the bottom of this. You're the sponsor. You're the sponsor here to Black Hill, Colorado's 3-1 discovery request to UCA. Is that right?
Yes.
And so if we can scroll up a little bit to the question A, we asked you to identify the corporate entity providing the forecast, and you identified as the Financial Forecast Center, which has no street address or telephone number, correct?
I said I don't have the street address or telephone number.
Okay. Did you attempt to look it up, or you just said you don't have it?
Just as I don't have the telephone number or street address for Value Line or any of the other ones I used too.
Okay, but we specifically asked you in discovery, so the question is, did you attempt to look it up?
No, I didn't.
Okay. And then we asked you to provide a complete description of the entity providing the cited forecast, and you provided description there, right?
Yes.
All right, and scrolling down to the next question. Is Mr. Fernandez aware of any citations to forecast.org as a reputable source of financial information? Your response is you corrected. It should be forecasts.org. And then you say Mr. Fernandez has not collected any citations. Is that correct?
That is true.
And then the last question, forecast.org purports to use random forest gradient boosting machines, extreme gradient boosting, support vector machines, and neural networks to produce its forecast. We asked for a description of those techniques and how they relate to the interest rates. And you say objected to that and did not respond, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I would seek admission of UCA 3-1.
Any objection?
No objection.
So moved.
And then turning to hearing exhibit 202. And this I will present to you as UCA's response to BHCOE UCA 3-2. If we scroll down to the bottom, are you the sponsor of this response?
Yes.
And here, going back to question A, we ask, identify the corporate entity providing the cited forecast, and that's specifically the December 2024 forecast for 30-year Treasury bond yields from econforecasting.com, relied upon by Mr. Fernandez, including the physical street address and telephone number. And your response was you do not have the information requested, right?
Correct.
And then we asked for a complete description of the entity. And you indicated how they describe themselves as a research-oriented team working to develop a unified source of open macroeconomic forecasts and indices to measure and predict the economy. But you didn't have any further information requested in that request, right?
Correct.
And then finally, is Mr. Fernandez aware of any citations to econforecast.com as a reputable source of financial information? And your response is you have not collected any citations. Is that right?
Correct.
I would seek admission of hearing exhibit 202.
Any objection?
No objection.
So moved.
Okay. So going back to hearing exhibit 201 to start. Again, the forecast, the December 2024 forecast you used was forecast.org at 3.5% and econ forecasting at 3.53%, correct?
Correct.
Would you agree that that number that you use for econ forecasting, 3.53%, was in error and that number should have been 4.53%?
If you'll scroll down to the December 2024, keep going.
This is as far as it goes.
It doesn't look like you have a complete printout here. The one in the work papers goes through 2024 and into 2025.
Okay, well, let's
In
go to
that
the actual.
basis, I would object to the admission. I think you've moved for admission of this. It's not a complete document.
Well, we'll see if we can get that into box right away, but actually my question doesn't depend on that. If we go to the actual source document first, if we go to hearing exhibit 120.
Do I have a ruling, Mr. Chairman, on my objection?
Yeah, it's not admitted. The objection sustained until we get to the bottom of how this document's going to be used and why it isn't a complete document. So the objection is sustained and this is not admissible right now.
Thank you.
If we go to Mr. McKenzie's hearing exhibit 120. At page 69. Scrolling down to line 11. Okay, Mr. McKenzie states, while UCA witness Fernandez utilized a 3.53% forecasted 30-year Treasury bond yield for December 24, From econforecasting.com, as shown on attachment AMM31, the source is actually reporting a projected 30-year Treasury bond yield for December 2024 of 4.53%. You see that?
Yes, and that is incorrect. When I pulled the data, when I was developing my testimony, it had a forecast of 3.53%, which I included in there, and I've included in my work papers all of the forecasts for multiple years.
If we go to attachment AMM31 of Mr. Fernandez's testimony.
Did you mean Mr. Sopkin, Mr. McKenzie's AMM
Yes, I
31?
meant Mr. McKenzie, thank you.
Yes.
So this is already admitted into evidence. Hearing Exhibit 120, attachment AMM 31, Treasury bond yield forecast. It has the website listed there. If you'd scroll down, well, actually, it's right there, December 2024. The web page lists 4.53%. Isn't that correct?
I cannot verify or validate what Mr. McKenzie did. All I can do is what I pulled, and I did a cut and paste of right off the website and included in the work papers, and it was 4.53%, or I'm sorry, it was 3.53%.
Okay. It appears that we have a dispute that could be easily resolved by simply referencing the website. So we will leave that there. Okay.
Well, forecasts
And then-
change,
I don't
so
have a question
mine is
pending,
what
Mr.
is
Fernandez.
included
I do not have a
when
question
I
pending,
pulled it.
Mr. Fernandez. All right. Then, with regard to the other forecast that you indicated you relied on, the 3.5% from forecast.org. If we can please pull up hearing exhibit 201.
This has not been admitted.
Oh, I'm sorry. Your Honor, if I could take one moment. I just need to locate this hearing exhibit. It should just take a minute.
Yep.
And I'm just about at the done here. I apologize, Your Honor. I believe it's hearing exhibit 134.
I'm sorry, Mr. Sopkin, you cut out for a moment there. Was it hearing exhibit 131?
134.
134. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Fernandez, I will represent to you. This is this is taken from the website, forecast.org is listed in the upper right. This was done on December 1, 2024. And if we scroll down just a little bit, the forecast at that time, December 1, was for the December 2024 date, the forecasted value was 4.32% from that organization. Do you have any reason to disagree with that?
I would assume you pulled this correctly from the web.
Okay. Your Honor, this is, I don't know if it's administrative notice or otherwise, but we believe this is capable of easy verification. The web link address is listed, and this is we will represent as of December 1, the forecast from that organization. We would seek admission.
Mr. Bunker?
Well, Your Honor, I would note that this was pulled, if we could go to the top of the page, I believe it was December. What was the comment from Mr. Sopkin? I don't see a date, but it was pulled recently. In
December 1st. It's in the top right.
Okay, thank you. December 1st, and Mr. Fernandez's answer testimony was drafted and filed, I believe, in July. So to the extent there may be a difference between the data contained in this document that was, say, roughly 4, 5, 6 months later, just making that notation, but I will not object to the admission of this.
So moved.
Okay, Mr. Fernandez, final question. First off, had you used, well, if this is updated from 3.5% to 4.32%, you'd agree that's an 82 basis point increase? Subject to check.
Yes, for this source, but you're also not taking into account the other source that I used.
Right, and econ forecasting, you're indicating that 3.53% is right. I showed you Mr. McKenzie's exhibit, which is straight from the website, showing 4.53%. If we're right on that, then there's 100 basis point difference on that. Isn't that correct?
Mr. Sopkin, just one clarification. I think you said 4.52%, and I'm having trouble seeing the number there, but I think it's 4.32%.
No, I wasn't referring to this document. I'm referring back to, for that, I'm referring back to Mr. McKenzie's attachment AMM 31. We could pull that up again if that's helpful. And there, December 2024, Mr. McKenzie represents from that website shown in the upper right corner of the box of 4.53%. If that's right, that's 100 basis points difference. Isn't that correct?
Your math is correct.
Thank you. Those are all the questions I have, Your Honor.
Thank you. Commissioner Plant, questions for Mr. Fernandez?
I have no questions.
Commissioner Goman?
Hi, good morning, Mr. Fernandez.
Good morning.
Just to follow up on a question I've asked a couple times, but I got ping-ponged back to you. So just looking at potential changes in income tax moving forward, is there a way we should or could foresee or set up any mechanisms to deal with that now to avoid, another TCJA proceeding type situation after the fact? So just curious if you had any ideas or insights on how that could be better handled.
Sure, happy to talk about it. There's really two aspects when you have a change in corporate income tax rates that impact the rates that consumers pay. First is the actual increase in income tax rate, or I guess it could also decrease. It could go either way, but that change in corporate income tax rates, the commission basically is going to have to wait till the next rate case in order to incorporate that change. Otherwise, the commission will get accused of single issue rate making. The second aspect of it is if it is a rate income tax rate decrease, it creates excess accumulated deferred income tax, and that is the part that the commission can do something with. There are two aspects to it. There's protected excess ADIT and non-protected excess ADIT. The protected part, the utility industry lobbied hard to get Congress to pass laws to protect this so they don't have to give it back very quickly. And so there's really not much the commission can do with that part of it unless they want to deal with rate a tax normalization violation. So that basically has to be returned over the remaining life of the equipment. The second piece of it, the non-protected, is the one that the commission can deal with and really push the utilities to return that to ratepayers as soon as practical. And as we saw with TCJA, some utilities were pretty good at returning it. Other utilities tried to slow walk it and keep the money as long as possible. So I would guess what I would say to the commission is use your bully pulpit and signal to the utilities that it'd be the expectation that if there is another corporate tax rate reduction, that the expectation would be to return the excess ADIT non-protected to ratepayers as soon as possible. And if utilities don't do that or slow walk it, then apply some interest rate to the amounts and pick an interest rate that's going to get their attention, such as like a credit card interest rate. So unfortunately, the commission's kind of limited in what they can do, but for the small part that they can, sure, that's great to be proactive and really signal to the utilities what the expectations are.
Thanks, Mr. Fernandez. That was my only question.
Thank you, Commissioner Gilman. Just a few questions along the lines of what I asked Ms. Segala. In prior cases, I guess mainly with Public Service Company, you supported using the capital structure of the holding company for purposes of setting WACC. But in this case, where there's no capital being raised at the operating company level, you now seem okay with using the capital structure of the operating company. Can you help me understand why your views shifting across cases?
Sure. I don't think my views are shifting. I think they're very consistent. In the last few public service rate cases, I've advocated for a pass-through capital structure because PSCO's frankly been using a very high equity ratio that materially prejudices ratepayers. And this 55 to 56% is much higher than averages, and it results in higher rates than what they need to be. So with Black Hills, they are proposing, or they utilize a capital structure that is lower than what PSCO is using. Their proposed capital structure is 52.5%, which is reasonable for a regulated utility. I'd like to see it about 50%, but I have a hard time arguing that ratepayers are materially prejudiced at a equity level of 52.5%. And there are also some differences between Black Hills and Piesco. Piesco is almost a pure play regulated utility. Their non-reg is like about 1% of the company, whereas Black Hills has some significant non-reg parts to it. So if you want to look at a pass-through, I think at the very least, has been discussed, you should remove all of the non-reg pieces from it. And the second piece that I think you need to look at gradualism, as I had advocated in the public service case, not moving several hundred basis points in one fell swoop, but want to maintain the financial security of the utility while minimizing the cost of capital. And from my experience working for a utility and in Treasury, I think the sweet spot for a regulated utility capital structure is roughly 50% equity and 50% debt.
Would you be opposed if we did something closer to that in this case? Or did that, or move more strongly towards something like the holding company capital structure? Which seems to me, since they don't raise any debt and equity, maybe you could argue that the actual capital structure is the holding company capital structure. But would you be concerned if we got closer to a 50-50, or give us any cautions? Or went below 50-50?
I would caution you going with an equity ratio below 50-50. I think you're going to run into some issues. The utility arguing that ratepayers are not materially prejudiced, and you could run into arguments that it's going to hurt their financial stability. But back to your original question, no, I have no qualms about encouraging or ordering the a 50-50 capital structure. As I mentioned, I think that's probably the sweet spot where the company has solid financials and it minimizes the cost of capital.
And if we wanted to go below 50-50, I get that they can argue it's confiscatory or whatever, but from the UCA, and without you making their arguments, from the UCA's perspective, would that concern you?
Just as a finance professional in my background, yes, going below 50% equity would raise some concerns.
All I got. Mr. Runker, redirect.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fernandez, do you recall the discussion with Mr. Sopkin regarding the Federal Reserve and interest rates being reduced?
Yes.
And is it correct in September, the Federal Reserve reduced the interest rate by 50 basis points?
That's correct.
And in November, the Federal Reserve reduced the interest rate by another 25 basis points. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And the Federal Reserve is meeting this next week, December 17th or 18th, but this next week. And what is your understanding of what the financial market thinks the Federal Reserve may do with regard to the interest rates at that meeting next week?
Financial markets are strongly expecting another rate reduction at that meeting.
And that would support your lower end of the ROE as recommendation, as Mr. Sopkin characterized your 9.3% as falling within your range. If the Federal Reserve reduces that interest rate again in December next week, that would further support your 9.3 ROE recommendation, wouldn't it?
Yes, and I'll go a little bit further is the market is expecting multiple rate cuts in 2025. So what I have been arguing is that capital costs are going down and will continue to go down in 2025. And that is something that the commission should take into account as they determine their authorized ROE.
And thank you for that. And do you recall the discussion about writers? And in particular, we could turn to your answer testimony, hearing exhibit 303 at the bottom of page 7 and top page 8. Mr. Sopkin asked you about your your testimony on starting on the very last line of 7 on line 23 and on the first line of page 8, where you commented writers, such as the ECA writers, virtually guaranteed risk recovery of all energy costs. Do you remember that discussion with Mr. Sopkin?
Yes.
And he brought up Storm Uri. Is that, do you recall that?
Yes.
And he made a comment or asked you a question that the company was unable to recover its carrying costs for the dollars for the short-term debt incurred for the Storm Uri case. Is that right?
Yes.
And you were involved on behalf of the UCA in some of the Storm Uri cases. Is that correct?
Yes, I was.
And was it your understanding that or is it your memory that when the commission issued its decisions opening the Storm Uri proceeding and required all of the utilities that were involved, so Black Hills Gas and Electric, Public Service for both gas and electric, etc., that there was a decision point at that time made by the commission that the utilities would not recover carrying costs on these dollars. Is that your memory of what the commission did?
That is what the commission ordered for all of the utilities in Colorado, correct?
Okay, thank you for that. And there was quite a bit of discussion regarding the bond forecast towards the end of your cross-examination by Mr. Sopkin. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Do you have anything further to say about the Treasury bond yield forecast, particularly given what the Federal Reserve has done and is predicted to do with interest rates?
Sure. The Treasury bond yield, we see a lot of volatility in that, and it changes every business day, every second of the business day. When I was preparing my testimony for this case in September, the 30-year Treasury bond yield was below 4%. We've in the last couple months here, we've seen it tick up a little bit due to some inflation concerns about federal government spending and borrowing and the possibility of widespread tariffs. However, the trend for the 30-year Treasury bond yield has been going down since earlier this year. So I would just caution the commission not to focus on any one point in time because there is volatility. It does go up and down every day, but the trend we've seen has clearly been down, and with the Federal Reserve reductions and more anticipated in December of next year, I fully expect this rate to continue to go down next year.
And that would be further support for your ROE recommendation of 9.3% in this case. Is that right?
Yes, capital costs are going to be lower for utilities and all companies as these rates go down next year. So yes, I would hope the commission would take that into account as they determine their authorized ROE.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fernandez, and I have nothing further, Mr. Chairman.
You may be excused, Mr. Fernandez. Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess we're to our last witness, Mr. Shaw. Can you hold up your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You can put your hand down. Is anybody with you or communicating with you in any way?
They are not.
If that changes, you'll let us know.
I will.
Thank you.
Your Honor,
Ms.
you had given me the opportunity, I believe, to introduce some exhibits through Mr. Shaw. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to start doing that. This is in response to the company objecting to my 423.
Yeah, it was one exhibit, as I recall, right?
Yes, but I need 3 exhibits to explain it. So, and I can.
Can we deem it has been explained in your cross-examination of the Black Hills witness?
No, Your Honor, because she denied knowing anything. And this is actually pretty simple. What I'm proposing to introduce is exhibit 424, which is the proposed Pueblo budget for 2025. And that was the source of the information that was on that spreadsheet I attempted to enter. But then I've also got 425, which is the November 2025 ordinance last week, approving the budget. So you need both of those that are public. And then hearing exhibit 426 is actually an affidavit of Mr. Nunn that has the spreadsheet on it that I attempted to introduce. But I do believe that since you want publicly available documents, that you need all 3.
And keep it quick.
Oh, yes. Okay. If you can move hearing exhibit 424 from my box and put it up for Mr. Shaw to see if he can identify it. Ms. Federico or Ms. Kinkle? And I've learned how to number all the pages and put the preceding number on it. So, Mr. Shaw, can you identify hearing exhibit 424?
Yeah, it's the budget that's presented to the city council for approval for next year, 2025.
So, Your Honor, I would move the admission into evidence of exhibit 424.
Any objection, Mr. Sopkin?
I would just ask, I assume this is somehow related to the NGO issue, and because that's what we were talking about. That was the exhibit at issue. So if this is somehow related to the NGO budgeting, I would like to see where in this document it is.
There are 2 pages that are in reference to it, and I get to that in hearing exhibit 426. I think it's D75, D77. There's a lot more data on that, those 2 pages. So
let's do all 3.
Okay. All right.
And move to a minimum after all 3.
So if staff can put up exhibit 425. Mr. Shaw, can you identify hearing exhibit 425?
I can. It's the background paper for the ordinance that's presented for city council for explaining the ordinance itself.
And at the end of that document is the signed ordinance approving the budget?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. And then if we can put
through this, can you just scroll through it really quick?
And at the very bottom, Mr. Chairman, it's got the signatures of the president of city council, Mr. Olive, and Heather Graham, the mayor, with the December 2, 24 date. Okay, if we can now look at hearing exhibit 426. And Mr. Shaw, can you identify hearing exhibit 426?
Yeah, the affidavit and support, it was signed by the currently interim director of the City of Pueblo Finance Director, affirming the ordinance and the budget itself.
And if you can scroll down, please, let's look at there is his explanation there, Mr. Sopkin, and then this is the spreadsheet that I attempted to introduce the last time. It comes from extractions from the proposed budget that Mr. Nunn made to show the effect on the NGOs. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would move the admission of hearing exhibit 424, 425, and 426.
I'm
Mr.
sorry, can I see
Sopkin.
page 1 of this document?
I'm sorry, sir, Mr. Sopkin.
You just asked to scroll up.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess what is being represented here is the first two documents that you seek admission of do not go into the detail of how these NGOs were affected, but this third document is an affidavit in which...
Mr. Sopkin, that's not quite correct.
Okay.
The budget has all of this detail on it on pages D75 and D77. And it
Okay,
should, because it's got the historical amounts that have been given in the past for a number of years, and then the requested amount. And so what Mr. Nunn was trying to do was to simplify and present what we're looking for, what I was looking for with respect to the effect on the NGOs. But there was an objection that this was not an official document, so I'm giving you the backup where anyone can do the same kind of calculation or pull the information out that Mr. Nunn did from the actual budget that was approved.
Can we see pages D75 through D77?
That would be back up on exhibit 424, the budget.
Should I go to page 75 and 74, or is it a different
I think
page?
it's D77.
Do you know what page that is in the PDF?
I knew you were going to ask that, and I cannot remember.
Okay, it might take me a bit to find it, but I'll do my best.
Yeah, you're going to want to go way, way down. Go to like page 90 or something. Go to page 90. Oh, there you go, 50.
Yeah, my concern is I don't even see like a letter marking on the page. So I'm worried I won't find it either way if I just scroll down, but
Let's try 107.
There you go. Oh.
Okay, and then I think there were two more pages. Maybe we could scroll down to the next two pages.
Scroll up to 105, 106.
Oh, sorry.
My fault. Start at the end.
Let me know when you're ready to move up again, Mr. Hopkins.
Yeah, we can move up again. Okay, and so I guess the question I would have is whether the third document here and that other original document we were seeking to admit, is that a representation of all of these entities or just some of these entities that are listed in this city budget?
When you get through to the two sections here, it references all of them that are on my exhibit 426.
Okay, and the other question I would have is, are all of the organizations listed, these NGOs that are, for which there's been budget changes, located within Black Hills Service Territory, or can that be represented?
Yes, they are. Well, except for the animal shelter. I don't know where that's at these days because I think they're using a facility from Colorado Springs, but the animal shelter is not on exhibit 426, Mr. Sopkin.
Okay, and if we could go to that third document again and scroll down to the second page.
The Pikes Peak Humane Society is on there, so I misspoke. It is on there and they're getting an increase. And that is not within your service territory. Everything else is.
And the organizations, NAACP, Juneteenth, those are located within Black Hills Service Territory.
Those are, yes, those are groups that are working within the Black Hills Service Territory.
Okay, I mean, look, I'm not going to object to public documents like the budget. I do have an objection because I don't think Juneteenth or NAACP or some of these organizations are located in Black Hills Service Territory. They're general nationwide organizations. So to the extent there are organizations listed here that are not within our service territory, I think that's irrelevant.
I would suggest, Mr. Chairman, that the commission should accept the admission of all three exhibits and you can give it the weight that you think is appropriate.
I think that's where I'm at, Mr. Sopkin. It seems like there's now clear relevance. There's a proper foundation for this exhibit, and I think we have the underlying data in the budget to get this right in the statement of positions. So I'd be prepared to admit it unless you have anything else, Mr. Sopkin.
Nothing else.
All right. So admitted. Thank you. Ms. Concelia, Commissioner Plant, any, you can, yep.
So just for the record, so 424, 425, 426 have been admitted, and 423, which was presented the other day, will not be part of the evidentiary.
Yeah, the objection is sustained on that, and that is not admitted. Commissioner Plant, any questions for Mr. Shaw?
I have no questions.
Commissioner Gilman, any questions for?
I do not. Thanks.
I just had a couple questions for you, Mr. Shaw. On page 19 of your answer testimony, you suggest that Black Hills should be sold to a larger utility. Just any thoughts about how that might work and what authority the commission has to do that?
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, I mean, we have thoughts on it. I guess kind of to preface it, the problem we're obviously running into is that the consensus, both in the business community, in my side, on the inability to attract companies that we want to do, the issue with the high rates and the existing high rates and the proposed increasing high rates, and for some reason, the inability for Black Hills to truly understand these effects that it's having. We're running into a situation where, based on the current the past as well as the future, both on a rates as well as a capacity, we're just not sure how we possibly can move forward anymore. So when you have a community like us that actually has 3 utility providers providing electricity, we're faced with the closure of a large coal facility that's going to affect us considerably. Obviously, that utility is adding significant capacity. We have capacity issues to attract the kind of companies we want to try to attract. The only conclusion we can come up with as right now for a viable path forward is to be served by a larger utility to some degree. So ideally, I mean, the best scenario would be obviously for Black Hills to be a willing seller, and a buyer of services if one's not already out there, or a determination that Black Hills just does not have the ability to provide reasonable rates to the community, nor does it have the ability to provide the loads that we're going to require or need to be able to respond to economic development that we have opportunities to potentially chase, and they don't have the ability to serve it on either side of it. And so that's why I think I recommended in my testimony that asking the PUC to open a hearing to supervise a sale of it, because we just don't see reasonably how they can serve this territory anymore, both on rates as well as availability.
Do we have, I know you're not a lawyer, but do we have the authority to do that?
Well,
in your view?
In full disclosure, I am a lawyer, but I'm not a practicing lawyer necessarily. I'm not necessarily going to be able to give you an opinion whether or not you can do that necessarily. We hope that there's a solution out there, that it can be crafted in some way. I'm not sure. I don't want to give a legal opinion on whether or not you have the authority to do that necessarily, but there is such a high level of frustration, and obviously it's come out in this hearing that we just don't see how Pueblo is going to be able to be successful, attract the kind of companies we want to attract, expand companies in Pueblo that need to expand, despite the representations by Black Hills that companies are expanding. They're not expanding. We just don't see a path forward. And so I'm hopeful that working with the PUC, potential legislature, whoever we have to work with, there would be a solution to sell the utility.
So I got, with that, well, I don't know, there's much room for redirect, Ms. Concealia, so.
Well, I was going to ask Mr. Shaw if he has any specific examples with respect to CS Win, Collins, or Fujifilm that can support the concern of the business community that there is not going to be expansion if Black Hills is continuing to serve.
I think that may go beyond the scope of my questioning. So
okay, can't argue with the chair on that, but I've tried.
With that, I appreciate your sticking with us, Mr. Shaw. With that, you may be excused.
The chair should know that Mr. Shaw contacted me at 5:45 this morning because there was a late school closure and he had to, with his wife, split getting kids to schools later, and he didn't know if he could make it by 9:30.
Well, appreciate you sticking with us. Hope your team won the baseball game last night. And you may be excused, Mr. Shaw. Thank you. With that, any final matters on the record? Let's start with Ms. Mandel. Did you have any final matters?
Yes, with the generous assistance of Ms. Dundas, I figured out the hearing exhibit numbers. And so in staff's box folder, I would like to move for the admission of hearing exhibit 519, confidential, and the slip sheet for it, hearing exhibit 5, the public version of hearing exhibit 519, confidential. And also I'd like to note for the record that the 519, here exhibit 519 is an explanation of the adjustments that Miss Sigala made to hearing exhibit 516. So I was referring to the incorrect, highly confidential hearing exhibit number this morning. It's hearing exhibit 516, highly confidential, that Miss Sigala's adjustments were made to.
Mr. Sopkin, does that sound right to you? Any objection to moving forward with that?
Well, I actually have a proposal to make some things non-confidential if we could.
That'd be great.
So with regard to hearing exhibit 519, we don't see any reason it needs to be confidential.
Okay. Thank you.
We would like, for clarity of the record, we have a couple of exhibits in only on a highly confidential basis that we would like to provide a public version of. And that includes hearing exhibit 514HC, which is the comprehensive Black Hills Corporation entities cap structure spreadsheet. So I believe that's in evidence. And that's so we would offer to provide a public version that includes the headers, rows, and columns, but with all the numbers redacted, except for Black Hills Colorado Electric and any other Black Hills regulated entities where the information has already been made public.
That seems like a useful amendment to your proposal, Ms. Mandel. You okay with that?
Yes, I have no objection. Staff's exhibit was the executable attachment 516, highly confidential.
Ms. Dundas, does that work for you?
Yeah, just so I understand, 516 highly confidential is already part of the record that's been admitted. We'll also admit 519 on a non-confidential basis, which is explanation for Ms. Sigala. We will not need the slip sheet there because it's public. Then there's an additional document from Mr. Sopkin that is a non-confidential spreadsheet that I missed the hearing exhibit number of.
514HC is highly confidential, but we
Okay.
are going to redact the highly confidential portions of it and submit a public version.
Okay.
So it'll just
So 514, which was what 516 was based on, will remain highly confidential, but there'll be a more fulsome non-confidential version in the record.
I think you mean 518 HC, or I'm getting the numbers confused now. But
I think we'll go with what I said, but I'm looking at it through box.
And I was going to make a corollary proposal to that hearing exhibit 518, highly confidential. That's the spreadsheet after being modified by staff witness Ms. Sigala. We would ask staff to develop a public version in exactly the same way we are willing to offer a public version of hearing exhibit 514 HC.
I think we can do that. It's an executable attachment. It will take a little bit of work to do that. We can, and then additionally, I would suggest that be numbered differently, because that executable, highly confidential attachment 516 needs to be available to the commission as is, but we can prepare a public version. And as Ms. Sigala is texting me, the public version will need to be a PDF and it will not be executable. So I would prefer that it be a different number.
Okay.
I'm fine with a different number. I imagine it's the same for us. It'll be a PDF as well for ours.
All right. Well, can we trust you all to get the record straight on this? If there's any open issues, we'll try and figure out a way to resolve them. Ms. Kunkel?
It's Casey. I just had a quick question about
Ms. Federico.
519. I just had a quick question about 519, since that's now being the confidentiality is being removed. It's still marked as HC on the document itself, but it's a Word document. I just wanted to ask Ms. Dundas and Ms. Mandel if it's okay if I just delete the HC from the header and the titling so it's public.
To be clear though, the label in the upper right-hand corner the C should be removed. However, in the title of the document, that should not be altered because it is an explanation of hearing exhibit 516 HC.
No, I understood that. I just meant instead of calling the document hearing exhibit 519C, it would just be 519.
Excellent, thank you.
And just one last item regarding that, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
And this is just to say, while we have no procedural objection to the admission of 518, we still have serious substantive concerns with that, including that Storm Uri was not taken out, that all regulated utilities were taken out and only non-utilities were left. And with regard to Arkansas, the short-term debt was not included, which is inappropriate under the methodology they use. So we will make those arguments in our statement of position. I just wanted to be clear so we're not waiving those arguments.
I think that is, I think the record is now clear on that. So thank you, Mr. Sopkin. Anything else to finalize the record?
Sure, I just suggest that the documents that aren't in there yet, which are the two non-confidential PDF versions of these spreadsheets, be uploaded in time so that we know if there's any concerns before the CWM tomorrow if we have to raise it. So
Yeah,
that's what we did today.
If we need to put this on the agenda for tomorrow to finalize the record, we can do that.
I think we can close the record today.
No, I'm closing the record today. Don't worry.
So my request is that those non-confidential versions be uploaded to Box today by 4 p.m. or so that we know if we need to discuss this tomorrow.
Yes.
That should be manageable.
All right. Any final record due process concerns? If anybody's got due process record, other concerns, speak now or forever hold your peace before we close the record.
Your Honor, I would approach this topic, since you mentioned due process, with a little bit of trepidation, but we've had some questions that have occurred from commissioners along the lines of, do you have any basis to disagree with X or Y? Public service company energy costs for their projects, JD Powers survey. We don't have any way to respond to that in this proceeding. And so I raise it now because I don't want to waive it.
Yeah, fair enough. What's the cure for that before we shut the record? The cure for that is not to rely on it in our decision. It sounds
that's
like.
right. I suppose that's right.
We're not going to decide this now, but Ms. Consilia, I mean, this is going to take us days with advisors and counsels. But go ahead, Ms. Consilia.
Well, closing the record on these and then having Mr. Sopkin do sort of a placeholder where he's objecting to commissioner questions, alleging that there's not a factual basis for them, is troubling to me. He could have dealt with that on redirect with his witnesses to say that the commissioners did not have a factual basis for their questions. He did not. There's always an arbitrary line when you close the record on cases. I'm not wild that he waived cross-examination of Mr. Shaw, which was going to allow me to establish that Ms. Thomas had no idea what she was talking about.
Right.
But that's sort of where we're at. And I don't think, if he didn't have the fortitude to cross-examine and redirect, or to examine and redirect and challenge the commissioners, he should not be allowed to do it later. That's my position.
All right, we're not going to litigate this now. I would propose statements of positions be due January 10th. Does that work for the parties?
It does, Your Honor, but I think it's customary in cases like these where the utility gets some additional page length. We have 29 witnesses to respond to. So we would request 50 pages, 50, instead of the 30-page limitation.
Any objection to that?
To be clear,
Oh, go ahead.
to
Just
be clear,
a question, Mr. Chairman, and is that 50 pages for all parties then?
I
Ms. Dundas,
wasn't proposing that, but the chairman can do whatever he likes.
Ms. Dundas, can you help me with prior practice?
Frankly, the parties probably know better, but I believe the rule says 35 pages. So if the parties are amenable to more pages and the commission's interested in reading that, go for it.
I didn't say that. So why don't we do the parties at 35 and Black Hills at 50? Does that work?
Well, I object to that. I think they should actually get left fewer pages because they're the ones that interjected this huge rebuttal case that we're all having a hard time dealing with in the last 5 weeks. So I think they ought to be stuck with 35 pages, the rest of us do.
I'm going to allow that 50 pages. Would you like more than 35 pages, Ms. Concelia?
I'd like the option, yes.
All right. So we'll set a page limit of 50 for all parties.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other items before we adjourn today?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I just want to thank you for hearing this rate case. I know it takes a lot of resources. And I want to thank you personally for running a tight ship. We're finishing a day early, and that's a great thing.
Appreciate it, Mr. Sopkin, and just want to thank all of you for the conversation over the past days. I know this is not easy, and we're working hard to try and get underneath these issues. Commissioner Plant, any final thoughts?
Yeah, just echo that. Thanks to all the parties, and also would like to extend a thank you to the community members that showed up in our various public hearings and shared their perspective. I think that was really valuable.
Commissioner Gutman.
Likewise, all of those thanks to all of you, all of those who attended the public comment hearings, provided comments and testimony here, as well as our wonderful legal assistants, Ms. Kunkel and Ms. Federico, who do just a phenomenal job. Always ready, getting us anything we need every time, keeping us organized, and all the advisors and attorneys working behind the scenes. So thank you to everybody for making it work, and happy to have come to a conclusion with this portion.
Well said. I just echo the comments about the Ms. Federico, Ms. Kunkel, and Commissioner Plant's appreciation for the members of the public who came. It's just an incredibly valuable part of this process. So with that, unless anybody has anything else, the record will be closed. I'll ask any final thoughts before we close the record and move on. Mr. Sopkin?
No, we'll get that document to you in box sometime, hopefully later today.
All right. With that, the record's closed, the hearing's adjourned, and we'll look forward to the statements of position, and I think we'll be deliberating on this in February. So thank you all. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.